guys better be tweeting. And if you don't know what the internet is, I'll let you know what it is right now. So it's what, HSM conference? HRH meeting. And the username and password is both micro and micro, in case anyone missed that. Because you guys didn't announce it earlier, did you? Oh, you did? Okay, well, there you go again. Anyways, so Jason talked about honesty. So I'm actually going to lie to you guys the whole time. All right. I got to say, though, this is one of my favorite conferences for a number of reasons, and I'll probably mention them throughout the talk and everything. So I've been doing business for 9 years on the web. I have, similar to Jason in some ways, I have a perspective that most people don't. I've built a consulting company to millions of dollars in revenue. I've built a bootstrap company to millions of dollars in revenue. And now I have a venture-backed company that's making millions of dollars in revenue, but still isn't where it needs to be because it's venture-backed and vultures own my life. And no, I'm just kidding. But really, I get a lot of questions. Someone was asking me earlier about should I raise money, should I not, blah, blah, blah. It's so individualistic, but at the end of the day, this is the conference that excites me the most because it's people that are actually building things on their own without anyone else's money. And that's really commendable. So I actually would say let's clap about that. I think that's really good. That's actually what makes me wake up in the morning and get really excited is the fact that I've done that for myself, and I actually like helping other people do that. Yes, I'm in Silicon Valley and venture-backed companies are everywhere, et cetera, but this is really what's exciting to me. Another thing that's exciting, and this is probably why I wake up every morning, is that this is a quote I truly believe. I want to hear from all of you. I don't care if you email me 10 times each. I'll do my best to respond. It might be one word or one URL in a lot of cases. I love helping people. It's something I learned from my father. It's something that is kind of who I am and what I do. So this is my favorite quote. It's in the bottom of my emails, and help me help you. So I'll get right into it now. Just give you guys a quick overview. Half the talk's going to be just entrepreneurship lessons across all three companies, and then the other half is going to be more lessons learned on how to sort of do a little bit of marketing and scale kind of really early and understand your audience and all that kind of stuff. That way I can give you guys some tactical things, hopefully give you those three things just in my talk so that I'll steal everyone else's thunder. No, not quite. But anyways, the big thing I've learned over these three companies is embrace the roller coaster. It is a roller coaster. You're an entrepreneur. Bootstrap is sometimes, you might think of it as a little bit harder because, your credit card is maxed out and all that kind of stuff. I think there's a speaker that's going to talk about maxing out credit cards and stuff. I've done that too, just for dumb reasons. Not as good as probably all of you. Anyways, I actually did it in college before. I had a Target credit card with like $100,000 in credit line that I maxed out. Anyways, I came out of college with like $1 million though. So anyways, so the roller coaster, embrace it. It will, it should motivate you. It should motivate you that you have that ability to control your whole life, your whole destiny, and do whatever you want to do. I've started recently talking to a lot of people that, have certain aspirations. They call them crazy ambitions, and most of the time they talk about these crazy ambitions to be able to go on a trip whenever they want, to be able to work 1 hour a day, only answer an email for like 2, 3, 4 weeks straight, things like that. And all this is possible if you're a bootstrap entrepreneur, but there is going to be a roller coaster, and there will be ups and downs. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. I'll be the first to tell you that. Next, this is one that I think it takes a lot of tuning and a lot of learning to get to. But really, it's to me, life is all about learning how to ask the right questions. And what I mean by that is I've asked questions of people, let's say my investors, and it was the wrong question to ask them. I shouldn't have asked them. Like they weren't going to help me with that. And in fact, I made the wrong decision because they told me something, and I took it. And anyway, so that's my most painful one of recent memory. But overall, this is asking questions of your customers, asking questions of your partners, asking questions of contractors that are working with you. This is one of the key kind of lessons learned that I've had, which is ask the right question to the right person at the right time, and being able to do that based on what you actually really need to know right now or need to understand, I think is really critical and would be in my top kind of three. So first is embrace the roller coaster, ask good questions, and last, and this is not least, this is probably the most important one, and all of you in this room I know have some aversion to this. The only reason for that is I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and they all have an aversion to this. And I'm looking at you, Dan. Anyways, I'm looking at all of you on this one. So your success requires focus. I would say that if there was one thing I would tell, like, my kid as he's growing up, if he wants to be an entrepreneur, or anybody that's, in high school and they're like, I want to be an entrepreneur, I would say, start learning how to focus now. And I mean with everything in your life. Focus your time, focus your energy, focus your efforts, focus your projects, so that you only have one. And that's why there's a one in there. Kill everything else and just stay razor sharp focus. I've worked with entrepreneurs there's an entrepreneur specifically that runs a sort of web design agency, has a bunch of software products as well, very common kind of theme. I think Dan knows what I'm talking about. And this is the one thing I've been working with him on. Every time I see him, I'm like, dude, when are you going to kill that thing? When are you going to stop that? When are you going to stop that? When are you going to focus on this one thing? And I think now he's finally there about 18 months later of me heckling him every one to 3 months. So this is the number one lesson that I've learned, which is that when I focus, magic happens. And magic is very hard, to make magic happen. Or, another way to look at it is when I focus, I get lucky. But I'll talk more about that in a second. So continuing on this theme of just across all the companies I've started, my lessons learned, let's get a little specific. So I'm going to start with the venture-backed one because that's the most uninteresting one to all of you. And to me in some ways. Anyways, the big one is architect your company. Jason talked about company culture and things like that. This is what I mean by this. Think about who you're hiring, why you're hiring them. And this is a little bit more than even like, I'm going to hire employees or anything like that. You're working with partners. You're working with contractors. It really does matter, if you value honesty as your number one thing, that they're all honest with you as well. It's one of the things, and I call it architect your company because you're building companies, and that's what it is. This is like, and this to me, the number one thing is actually culture. So I'm going to give you a book recommendation. This is a book called Tribal Leadership. And it'll help you architect your company. I don't care what kind of company you're running. I don't care if it's just you. Eventually, it will not be just you. If you have contractors, they matter as well. This is the only book that I've found that actually can give you a practical understanding and a framework of thinking of how to actually build a high kind of company that thrives, I guess, as they call it. And you have to work in groups to make that happen. So first book recommendation would be Tribal Leadership. It's definitely very research-based. They studied a lot of companies. They have very good stories in it. But at the end of the day, they give you a framework of understanding where you're at in your company with all the people involved in it or your own thinking and kind of where you need to go to really build something that thrives and sort of, works on its own. And I can't, have a talk without talking about metrics. So I'll talk about metrics for a couple minutes. So basically, another lesson learned, especially with KISS metrics, for a number of reasons, and some of my other businesses, is basically you need to focus on the metrics that are actionable, things that actually matter to your users, your customers, your people, things that are not like page views. Those will actually kill your business if you're just measuring those and they go up and to the right or they go down and you're thinking that that's going to have an impact on your revenue. For many of you that run software, companies probably know that even 10, 20,000 unique visitors every month can result in millions of dollars in revenue every year. At least I know that, I've seen that, and it's not by focusing on that volume that's going to get you that revenue. It's actually by focusing on the things that matter to you that are actionable to your business. So I've got a little link there. My presentation's on SlideShare. I tweeted it earlier with the hashtag. You guys can follow along, click on it, whatever you want to do. I didn't want to get into this too much because this is just a really big, strong lesson. I think there's not enough people talking about this yet, but I'm sure there will be. And next up would be another book recommendation. Now, this book, I'm recommending it for a different reason than you might think. It's not the same as like Tribal Leadership or some of the other books I'm going to talk about. It's have any of you read it yet? Yes. Okay, a lot of you. Okay, 2 hands. I like that. Okay, so that means it must be good. Yeah, double. So I think it'll help you understand why certain entrepreneurs have been successful and give you a framework of how to think about your own kind of business. And this lean startup isn't just for bootstrappers. It isn't just for venture-backed companies. It's for everyone. It's not, lean means efficient, not cheap, although all of you, I'm sure, want to be frugal, so that's good. Anyways, I highly urge you guys to read the book if you have not experienced kind of or understood what this lean startup thing means at its core. And on that note, this is what it means to me. This is a diagram Eric Ries uses, and he talks about the process of going through this loop as fast as you can, as often as you can. It's build, measure, learn. I'll talk more about that a little bit later, but overall, the idea is that in any organization, when you're trying to accomplish a goal, you want to go through this kind of loop as fast as possible and in tune so that you kind of are more successful and you're actually building things people want. In a lot of cases, things people want to buy. And the Eric Ries Love Fest continues. But basically, this is kind of, I think, a very, very telling quote and really sums up the lean startup to me, which is basically the only way to win is to learn faster than anyone else. Faster than your competitors, faster than the next entrepreneur, sitting right next to you, whatever it is. And that's kind of the guiding principle that I would use to run any business at this point, which is how fast can I learn? It's not how fast can I make money. It's not how fast can I get 10,000 users. It's actually how fast can I learn? And because that learning is what really causes you to achieve kind of the great stuff you want to achieve. So now I'm going to talk about how I learned and how my co-founder and I decided to kind of spend our money and our time when we started our first company. So our first company was called ACS. We started it in 2003. It's basically a consulting company. And what we did was basically SEO, social media marketing, and a lot of internet marketing. And this was back in 2003. The way it started was I got out of college. I went to UC Berkeley, stayed 5.5 years, made a bunch of money while I was there, running a bunch of offline businesses. And my co-founder, who was, I think, almost at the end of high school at the time, so he was like a senior, had one customer paying him $3,500 a month for SEO. And it was like a local customer, and he actually met that customer in like an improv college class or something. It's really weird. Anyways, and I got out of college. I didn't know what I was going to do next, and I liked the internet. I didn't know that much about it besides having a computer, since I was 8 years old. And so we basically started the company. And since we started that company, we realized really fast within the first year that we were not technical. I'm not technical. I kind of fake it now. He doesn't. And we needed to learn how to build software because we wanted to build software. We wanted to run software companies because the internet was where it was at. So what we learned the hard way is that it takes time and money to learn. And what I mean by that is that, from Eric Ries's quote to kind of my own experiences prior to even understanding kind of what he was talking about or even knowing him, for me, the way I've made advances in my life, whether it's in my businesses or even in my personal life or whatever, is by learning as fast as I can, as much as I can, but really staying focused on what I want to learn at any given time. So what we did in our consulting company is we actually, I think the number is somewhere around between 70 and 100, but essentially 75 plus contracts. What I mean by that is not people paying us, it's us paying people. So we, started making, several $1 million in revenue pretty fast because it was consulting and we built our brand and all that stuff. And so we spent about over $1 million, had dealt with, close to 100 people where we hired them. So this was web designers, web developers, anyone we could find to work with to try to help us learn and help us build stuff. This is how we learned because we were actually making money at the time. If we weren't making as much money or our businesses weren't scaling, I would have probably started learning how to program, and my co-founder would have probably started learning something else like more sales tactics or something like that based on kind of how we divide and conquer our businesses. And this has provided us with infinite gain, meaning I'm here today because of the effort I put into learning by hiring people. Could have easily started writing code at that time instead of hiring people, but we got into this sort of IV drip that I'm sure a lot of you understand, which is the IV drip of consulting, which means someone will pay you to make, someone will pay you and you can do stuff for them and it'll make you money, but that doesn't mean you're furthering your own life or your own kind of progress as an entrepreneur. And so I would urge all of you to kind of think of this, think of ways to learn. It doesn't have to be with money. That was just my example. It can be with a lot of other things. So big lesson here for me was it's always, it takes time. I would almost say it takes time or money to learn, but really time and money would be a better way to look at it. Another thing was make lots of friends. So I can't even, this seems very obvious to people, but these are 3 people that we made friends with back in, many years ago now. This is Matt Mullenweg, who's the founder of Automatic WordPress, Om Malik, who's the founder of GigaOM, and Jeremy Shoemaker, who runs shoemoney.com. I'm sure all of you are familiar with one or all of these guys. And this is just, this is not This is not representative at all. There's just a ton of people we know, and the reason we know all these people is because we always looked at ourselves as wanting to help others. And as a result, we've helped all these people, and they've helped us back. And this has resulted in kind of things that I can't even describe in terms of what those relationships have done for me and my co-founder and my businesses and all that kind of stuff. All these guys are personal friends. I've got a lot of them now. But the thing I would say is, like, it's very easy to get caught up in, hey, I'm gonna go sit at my desk and like just work on my project, work on my business, and that's it. Instead, I think it is important to dedicate some of your time to either, whatever way you want to do it. Maybe you don't help others, but you start, commenting on their blog, or you get engaged with something that other people are saying. It's really about making friends. I think, we're still very early in the internet era, if you want to call it that, and there's a lot of, room, a lot of people, and a lot of people are open to talking and all that stuff. So that's a big one. So with one of those friends, we decided to start one of our kind of, I'd say the story is about 20 or so different ideas that we failed at. And one of them was called Fruitcast. I've talked about it before. I'm going to talk about it a little bit differently here with the more lessons we learned doing this one. And so with this one, it was basically a podcast advertising network. And this was when there was the ODO and before a lot of the iTunes podcasting stuff really came out. And so we were trying to connect basically podcasters with advertisers and give them both a platform to essentially coordinate making ad money and launching their podcasts and marketing them. In this case, though, even Michael Arrington knew something that we didn't about our business, and really, at the end of the day, our customer. So this lesson I would tell you guys that we learned the hard way on that business, the primary lesson was you got to focus on your customers. So what he knew about our customers was that they would not pay our prices, and we didn't even know that. And what I mean by that is we had advertisers who we wanted to pay for these advertising in these podcasts, and they had the amount we were trying to charge, they don't even pay on radio ads basically. So there was no business there. We didn't talk to that customer segment. We actually only focused on one of our customers, which was the podcasters. So we built a lot of tools for them. Instead, we should have also talked to advertisers, because without advertisers, that whole business doesn't work. So focus on your customers. I know everyone says it, but when you go through pain, like building something people don't want, we spend about 60, 70 grand on that project. This is what ends up happening, is it fails, it's dead. So this was basically how it died. Our friend that we worked on with it, and we worked on multiple friends on this one, but was waiting for, he was hoping we'd find some magical combination of events that would jumpstart it. Have you guys ever heard anything like that before from anybody? Like they're waiting for magic. Yeah, so magic doesn't happen. You make your own luck. And you do that by having friends. You do that by a lot of the other things I mentioned. You also do that by focusing. But in that business, like, we were all just building something. We didn't really think about the customer. We thought, we knew their pains because maybe some of us had done podcasting before or tried to do podcasting. But at the end of the day, we didn't make any luck there, and there was no momentum. There's nothing there. And everything that I've done that's been successful, or everything I've seen other people do, is they end up creating this momentum when they focus, when they really think about how other people can help them and all those kind of things, and they end up making their own luck. And this is just a kind of something that every entrepreneur doesn't really need to think about, but just needs to understand that this is how luck works. You make it. You don't get it. And this was the brand and the company and the logo of our hosting company. And we ran some other experiments after that. We also built like a buzz tracker or a social media monitor system with the same brand. But first was our hosting company. And on this one, we actually never went live with a single customer. And we spent $1 million working on it. And it was because we were so hung up on the solution. And so the story here is my co-founder, Neil, actually, the story's pretty complex, but we actually ended up buying a house in Texas. The data center was in Texas. And we had a whole bunch of racks and servers all over that house, in the garage and everywhere. And we had air conditioners, and there were people living in the house that were working on it. And we got into the situation with one of those basically contract houses that we did, that we contracted with, and we decided to do this idea with them. And we were, my co-founder Neil ended up flying down there and learning all kinds of things about switches and networking that he doesn't even care about anymore, probably doesn't want to talk about. We bought, somewhere in the mid six figures in terms of servers and stuff like that. Product never went live. We designed the website. We did all of that kind of stuff. But what we really didn't think about was the problem we were really trying to solve. I mean, as all of you know, hosting's a crowded market. As Jason has shown, there's problems there that can be solved if you're focused and honest, apparently. And so we didn't do that. We just kept building and building and building. And we didn't think about the customer. We didn't think about the problem we're trying to solve for them. We just thought it was such an awesome idea because all these other people were making tens of millions of dollars on hosting. And that was what drove us, which was bad. So in contrast to the millions of dollars we spent on contractors and trying to learn, this was not learnings. This was 3 years, over $1 million burned, and there's infinite loss here. Yes, we learned, but I would say that out of everything I've done, this project was the one I learned the least on, and that's because I didn't really know what I was trying to learn. We were just trying to pour money into something, and we thought we'd get lucky. So that's the first half. That was about just lessons learned across everything, and I know it ended on a painful note for me at least, maybe not for all of you, because I don't think any of you have dreams of starting hosting companies besides Jason. Anybody else starting a hosting company or thinking about that right now? Anybody else have one? Ever had one? Thanks. All right, awesome. So Jason, you're a lone ranger there. I like that. That's good. So I'm going to talk about Crazy Egg. So for those of you that don't know, this is what I call not the one that got away, but the one that kind of worked. And it was one of our 20 projects that we worked on. I talked about the other 2 or 3, and there was numerous others, but those were the 2 or 3 that were most painful and kind of some kind of learning, whether it's just how stupid I am or not. But with Crazy Egg, what we did is what it is it's you put a JavaScript on a website and it creates heat maps where people are clicking on a page. And you might think that's a common thing because it is now, but we essentially helped pioneer that category of visualizing clicks on a site back in 2005. So that's when we kind of launched it. So what I'm going to go through now is actual tips and practical advice on, and in a thought process and a framework on how to actually think about your market, think about your customers. A lot of it's inspired by lean startup stuff. A lot of it's inspired by just multiple ways and businesses that I've done this with that are my own. So getting started with that, one lesson here would be always begin with a hypothesis. So for us, whether it's marketing, sales, features to add, a new idea we have, like completely new idea, although we shouldn't have new ideas for new businesses, we should stay focused, is we always start with a hypothesis. And I'll explain what that is in a second, but we've got another kind of book recommendation here. So my friend Brant and Patrick wrote a book called The Entrepreneur's Guide to Customer Development. It's actually a cheat sheet to the first part of another book called by this guy named Steve Blank. Do all of you know what customer development is? Who knows what customer development is? Cool, a lot of you. Okay, great. If you don't, this is the first book to get on the topic. Basically, it helps you understand this whole process I'm actually going to talk through and explain. And helps you do it for yourself. So it's a very practical book. It's only 100 pages. It's pretty inexpensive. It's probably, if you don't do anything else, I would read the book and start practicing these principles. I mean, that's gold for all of you that don't know kind of this stuff. And this is all kind of more newer stuff. It's really starting to bubble up in the last 18 to 24 months where people are starting to understand that they have to do things with a more iterative approach and with more focus. So for Crazy Egg, our problem hypothesis, and this is all hindsight, we didn't actually have one at the time, we got lucky, but what it was people who are responsible for improving web user experiences have a problem communicating what needs to be improved. So that was our hypothesis. And, or that would have been our hypothesis if we were to start today. The reason I say that is already we have a lot of data points to prove this. So with Crazy Egg, it visualizes where people are clicking. It's a tool that's not always on, so you actually have to turn it on and off to analyze your different pages. You have to pick what pages you want to turn it on. And so a lot of things we commonly hear about it are that people use it to basically end debate on what to work on or where there's problems. So a stakeholder in a company might want to leave the search box where it is. Well, if you do a heat map on that page, you might realize that no one's clicking the search box. It's not really an important piece of real estate on the page. So there's a lot of those kind of things that we've learned, and so I came up with this hypothetical hypothesis. But knowing what I know today, if I had this hypothesis, everything we would have done on how to launch the product and all that would be actually quite a bit different. because what we would be doing is trying to invalidate, essentially, this hypothesis aggressively. And what I mean by that is I'm not trying to prove that I'm right. I'm actually trying to prove that I'm wrong. And the reason for that is, of course I'm right, I'm an entrepreneur. Like if I try to go prove I'm right, I'm going to find a way to prove I'm right. So what you have to do when you have a hypothesis like this is start talking to customers, start talking to people, and start trying to figure out whether you're actually right. Whether it's wrong, to really figure out whether you're actually right. And it's a very tough thing to do because it's a mindset that you're not necessarily used to as an entrepreneur. What you want to do is pick up the phone and start telling people about your awesome idea, while what you really need to do is talk to people about the problems they actually have, so that you can balance it and understand if these are problems that you can solve for them or these are the most painful problems. Again, that book I mentioned, it'll go through it. The URL is custdev.com, custdev.com, and it'll help you kind of map all this stuff out. This is like what I hand out to people on my team. I've handed it out to everyone on my team, including the Tribal Leadership book. A lot of these books are all ones that I share with as many people as I can, because this is, at least there's a framework and a way of thinking about things. So what we did with Crazy Egg that worked really well was we actually made our product really simple. Even to this day, it just does one thing. Yes, there's a few more features and things like that, but at the end of the day, it just does one really simple thing. And what it does is this. It helps you see where people click. That's the proposition that we kind of came up with and doubled down on once we kind of started understanding our market and understanding our customers and understanding what they wanted. This doesn't do mouse movements. It doesn't show you all these recorded visits of people and what they did individually. It's really about the aggregate data to help you see where people click. And this is actually, when you look at any other product in our market today that does any of this stuff, they actually don't understand this, that this is the core problem that at least we're trying to solve, and the core problem we discovered those type of people I mentioned before had. And we were able to release a really simple product as a result of that. So now I'm going to go through kind of how we went through that process and how you should go through it. So, another kind of big lesson is you start with a specific audience. So for Jason, I'm picking on him because he talked earlier. It's people that are in a very specific mindset and have a kind of what I would call this middle market need for a WordPress hosted blog. So he mentioned, if they're kind of a consumer, he'd probably show them WordPress.com and say, hey, you can just sign up there and get a quick blog to talk about your recipes and your cooking and all that. And maybe one day you'll get much bigger and start making money. You can come to me. I'm sure he says something like that. On the other end, you can go with WordPress VIP if you're willing to pay thousands of dollars a month and have these like crazy amount of traffic and crazy needs. So he's filling a gap in the market. So I think he figured out what audience he needed to go after. When you talk to most people in that market, I've done that. I talk to people that use WordPress a lot. He's actually hitting on a very good sweet spot that even the folks at Automatic don't actually want to attack as far as they've told everyone. So they've been on record on that. So I think he found a really good niche in the market. Even today, when I think of where do I host like my company blog, I'm better off hosting it on WP Engine than anywhere else, because it really hits on a certain customer segment. So you have to start with a specific audience. I know all of you might already have products and you're like, oh, well, I already have a product, I built it, and I have all these people using it, now what do I do? You can still go back and do this process and actually understand who's using it, why they're using it, and figure out which segment you actually need to double down on. And so that's something that is a constant kind of question I get, but it's still possible. It doesn't matter if you have something or not. So there's no black magic to this stuff. It's not something where it's like, you can't do this. So I'm going to go through 3 simple questions you can ask yourself, including the hypotheses and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you just want to understand a few simple things about your customers to figure out how to essentially start engaging your audience before you even actually release something. And the reason you want to do that is you want to understand what problems they have. It's not a marketing exercise exactly. It's more so a way to actually get attention for what you're doing and get access to people you can talk to. So I want to be very specific here. We do this all the time, even in our own product, even though we are marketing it and all that. When we release a new feature that we think is going to hit a different segment of the market or get us new customers, we think of it like, can we go figure out who these people are and sort of walk through this process even for a single feature? And I'll go over that in a second. So first question is, who are your customers? Again, there's a lot of people in this room that have generic products that have lots of different customer bases. I've talked to many of you about that. And there's some that have very specific and they understand their market. If you go look at the people that are actually growing the fastest today, they actually have a specific persona, a specific customer that they're thinking about when they build their products. So with Crazy Egg, we didn't say it was web designers, we said it was people that were designing web user experiences. The reason for that is there's user experience professionals, there's usability folks, there's marketers. All those people are involved in designing the web experience. And so we made it a little bit broad in the case of that product, but it worked really well. But in the beginning, it wasn't like that. So I'll explain that in a second. The other thing you want to answer after you figure out who that customer is, and again, it's a reason to be very specific, is where do they hang out? So where are they? Where do they hang out? How can you engage them? These are all the kinds of things that come out of this. So, last one is how should you engage? And, this is like my typical line when people ask me, well, I don't know if I can reach that customer is beg, borrow, lie, steal. Because that's all you need to really do. Think of it like that. And I don't mean you do anything, that's dishonest or immoral or whatever, but at the end of the day, you need to reach this customer. You need to figure out where they are. I've been in exercises where people would go out to like AA meetings and wait outside and try to talk to those people. Right, so it's totally beg, borrow, lie, steal. Like, come up with really creative ways to reach these customers. You're not trying to do marketing. You're actually trying to find them so you can engage with them. My two examples that I'm going to give are for Crazy Egg and Kissmetrics, but we still kind of went through that same process. So for Crazy Egg, it was people who design websites, and we made some friends. So a couple of these people are my friends. One of them isn't, but that's all good. So we basically made it for people who design websites, and that was our customer. So that was a very straightforward, easy customer that we could go for. And back when we started, there was actually a big kind of blogging network. Does anyone remember 9 Rules? Okay, awesome. So we were, one of our blogs was actually in the network, and so we had access to their private forum that they had where you had quite a few of these folks already in the forum kind of, designers just talking about design stuff. And so we leveraged that. And the way we actually engaged them was we helped them be more awesome. And that's what we did for them. And this is the truth. I'm not even trying to be coy about it. Like at the end of the day, what we realized about them is they want to be more awesome. They want to help, they want to understand how effective their web designs are. And they want their customers to understand or their clients to understand how awesome they are or their stakeholders in the company. And so by building our tool and by thinking about it this way, we were able to actually engage with them and help them understand that we're trying to help them help them communicate their designs, communicate the effectiveness of their designs in a very visual representation, in a visual form. And since these were designers, they appreciated our design aesthetic and stuff like that versus just looking at lots of Google Analytics data and all that. Remember, those are vanity metrics. So what we did then was we started to build an audience really early, and this was back in 2005 when I don't think too many people were thinking of things like this. There weren't that many landing pages like this, but since we knew who we wanted to attract, we knew how we were engaging at least some of those early people, we just put up a landing page. This was our original teaser. It was like a design comp. This is very old now, but that's what it was, and it kind of gave you an idea of what it would do, and if you kind of look through it, it has a lot of the same kind of see where visitors are clicking and all that kind of stuff on there, which is the message we wanted to share. And this was before we did this even before we had a product, when we were just designing it still. So what we were able to achieve here is 23,000 pre-launch emails. We did pay for some of them because what we were doing was we had the money, but we also knew that a lot of our users beyond the 9 Rules crowd hung out on CSS galleries, because that was when CSS galleries were the hot shit. And nobody was actually advertising on them. It was very cheap. So it was like, I think less than $1 per email or something like that we spent. It was very little money. I said something to somebody yesterday where if I were to do it today, I can do 200,000 emails for free, and it just takes a little bit of time and effort. So in the same scenario, same type of product, that's the scale we can achieve today because of the number of people on the web and all these different platforms that exist, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So we've gotten to over 200,000 customers. I don't remember the exact count right now, and well over 7 figures in revenue at this point as a result of what we did early. And I attribute a lot of our success, to date, to these strategies that we use and our thinking around actually reaching the audience. Now, hindsight's 2020. So the way I laid it out is a lot more structured view on what happened. But at the end of the day, like the reason I like kind of all the other things I shared in the process and the frameworks and the lean startup and all that is it's quantifying what a lot of entrepreneurs already do very naturally, what many of you might have already done, or a certain piece of this, but helping you understand how it can actually help you, how you can learn more, how you can actually grow revenue and things like that as a result of it. So the next example I'm going to give is for Kissmetrics and what we did there. So our customer was online marketers with websites. So I got my co-founder because he's one of those guys, Jeremy Shoemaker because he's an affiliate marketer, and Sean Ellis up there who was VP of marketing at LogMeIn and another company called Uproar, and they've been companies that have IPO'd. And then he's helped a bunch of popular kind of famous companies in the Valley, I guess, like Dropbox and Zobni. And so we had a specific customer in mind. And this was, mind you, this was all before we even knew exactly what product we were going to build and how we were going to kind of market it or any of that. We just needed to attract these people and make sure that we were kind of engaging with them and in the conversation. So in this case, what we found very interesting is that the early adopters of kind of, of Twitter happened to be like techies and geeks and all that stuff. And they ended up kind of congregating around this hashtag. It's the measure hashtag. It's on Twitter. Anybody know the measure hashtag at all? No analytics folks? Cool. Yeah, of course you do. That was Patrick McKinsey. He knows every hashtag on Twitter around this stuff. And I'm looking forward to his talk too, but we'll get into that later. So it was a measure hashtag, and it was where all the analytics geeks and the marketers hung out. And so we quickly identified that. We also knew that Twitter was an emerging platform at the time, and people hadn't figured out how to grow an audience on it. Luckily, I was one of the first 3,000 or 4,000 users, so I'm like 3,000 something. And my personal account already had some traction. But without using that too much, we started building up the Kissmetrics account. But because I had an audience already, and it was funny, the reason I had an audience is back in the day when there was like tens of thousands of people on it or hundreds of thousands, they had featured profiles, and my picture would just get rotated out through there. So I kind of got lucky by being early. Again, another reason to be early on some of these platforms. But so I already understood how Twitter worked, and I felt like this was a good way to kind of attack the problem. So we started engaging people on Twitter, and the result, and this is the results today, is that we've tweeted about 10,000 times, which is not as much as my personal account. I've tweeted about 18,000 times on that account. And this is our main Kissmetrics account. There's 88,000 followers, and this is all done with a zero budget and literally me doing it. There's no one else that's really worked on the Twitter account beyond some design work and stuff like that. I still manage it. It's just something I like to do. I don't think I need to manage it, but I do have a certain quality bar. So has anyone ever clicked a link on the Kissmetrics Twitter feed, from the Kissmetrics Twitter feed? Awesome. Great. Yeah, that makes me happy. So that's me. Anyways, I'm just pretty good at curating content and finding content really fast and all that stuff. So it only takes me a couple hours a week to manage that account and keep tweeting awesome stuff. Now, the thing that that this has helped us do, though, is we first had a Twitter account. So we built an audience, and then we launched our blog. And with that Twitter account, while we were still working on our product, we would throw out customer development surveys. We would link to our landing page and collect email addresses and all that kind of stuff. And we had a tremendous amount of email addresses for free before we launched because of our Twitter account and the scale we get it to. And this is still a core marketing strategy for us today, but it didn't start with marketing. It actually started with, how do I reach this customer I'm trying to reach? So as a result of all this, we've actually quantified our cost per signup. And what I mean by that is we don't spend any money on marketing in terms of paid marketing. This is all between our Twitter account and our blog. And that's really what our primary generator is. And we do some guest blog posts in other places. This is all inbound marketing. And we've been able to drive the cost down to $7.35 per trial sign up for Kissmetrics. And this is like quantifying the amount of time the writers, and literally all in, this is the cost for most of it generated through our blog and our guest blogging, and then obviously the Twitter account. So in our space, people are paying at least $100. They're paying like $20 per click on Google. So they end up paying per sign up. Sometimes I've heard numbers as high as $200-300, all the way up to like $1,000-2,000 if they want enterprise leads, and we get enterprise leads at this price as well. So that's just selling the dream on why this stuff is really important and why it matters. Next up would be kind of what I'm going to talk about is things that other speakers are going to talk about too. So I'm not going to get too deep into them. The one thing I got to say is we use Twitter. Before that, we used the CSS galleries, which were essentially other websites. Today, there are so many platforms that can help you reach your customers. And I'm not talking about marketing. I'm talking about how to build channels yourself, things that are sort of your own earned media, things you build out, where you build an audience. So these are just examples. I am almost 100% sure, at least, most of these are used by all of you in some capacity for marketing or to engage an audience. I know someone in the back of the room that actually uses Apple's App Store like crazy, and he's turned it into a business. So all of these can be used to engage an audience and learn. And Instagram is another interesting one that I'm seeing some companies leverage. There's a company called Sincerely that builds a product called Postagram. You should check out their Instagram account. It's amazing what they do and how they engage their audience and all that stuff. Again, this is not marketing. This is engaging with other people. That's what's really important and the key I want to say about this. You do some stuff with Salesforce if you want to reach sales folks. It's another platform. So these are all essentially platforms to reach customers, not just for marketing, but to actually have conversations with them. And depending on what you're doing, the different platforms can be relevant to you. So there's been a hygiene-oriented product that blew up on YouTube. I have a Blend Tech. Their main marketing channel is YouTube. I know folks that are going crazy on Tumblr between posting random photos on a stream to even somehow, and I haven't figured this out yet completely. Actually, no, I know how. So there's an ad network out there that their primary channel of acquiring basically impressions is by building a Tumblr theme and basically marketing it. And another example would be the folks at Airbnb. There's a big blog post about this. I've got a link in the next article for a bunch of articles on how to do this stuff and what it's actually called now, where they actually were leveraging Craigslist. They actually weren't the first. There's been a bunch of companies that actually find ways to grow because of Craigslist. So these are all the kind of things that you can do in all these platforms. I've seen every single one of these. I've seen people go crazy. And if you look at Pinterest, if it mattered to me, my business would probably be super early on Pinterest, except that the demographic they go after isn't necessarily our demographic. But I've seen crazy traffic coming from Pinterest to things that are very relevant. So there's a company that does things around weddings and engagements and stuff like that. That's just going crazy just because of the things they post on Pinterest and how they get the audience engaged. So build your own channels. That's the big lesson here that I would throw at everybody. And build them early, build them now. And this is like the tip of the iceberg. There's so many channels that I can't even begin to put them on one slide, literally, that you can leverage today. And there's going to be a lot more. And last but not least, so I think on the previous slide, that's something Patrick McKinsey is going to talk about at the end of the day tomorrow, the last talk. And this thing about growth hackers is something Dan right there is going to talk about today, Dan? Yeah, today. So I don't want to get too far into it, but what I would say here is, especially for what we've been doing, how we did all those other things was essentially growth hacks, like basically hacks that help you grow. There's ways to do them if you're an engineer, ways to do them if you're not an engineer. You don't have to be an engineer. I did them without being an engineer, and they all worked. But the whole idea is, especially if you're bootstrapped, you need to find ways to grow. You need to find ways to grow and leverage other people's platforms, and you don't necessarily have any budget to do it. So that's a definition of a growth hack in my mind. Again, it's not just for marketing. It's also for engaging your audience. It's all kind of melded into one, but this is kind of what you would call it. And this is one of my favorite quotes about the topic, but essentially, if you've heard what I've talked about and some of my big lessons, it's really you have to connect your target market and your solution. And those things need to be married. And so a growth hacker essentially does that. So I would say that I think all of you are growth hackers one way or another, especially if you're building these kind of bootstrapped micropreneur sort of businesses that could one day be really huge. And so I've got a link there on some Growth Hacker 101. You'll start hearing this term a lot very soon, I'm pretty sure. That's it from me. I got time for questions, I think. Right? Lots?
Excellent. Who has questions? We have time for a couple. Then we'll do some teardowns. All right. Mr. Foley.
Sometimes when thinking about various ideas, it's harder to engage people in terms of problem instead of solution. And so when you have, can I give a specific example?
Sure.
Something about trying to, it seems intriguing to me, the idea of creating virtual badges for events like this, virtual swag, essentially. How, that's such a esoteric idea, maybe it's just a bad one, but how do you translate that into a problem and talk with someone like Mike without giving, without focusing on my idea?
Yeah, so just off the cuff, the hypothesis that I would go for is people that attend conferences have a problem getting recognition for their attendance. That's a hypothesis you go after. So you wouldn't go, you're thinking there's a solution there you have in mind. What I'm saying is there's actually some core problem listed out like that, and then go talk to conference attendees. Don't tell them I'm going to do this virtual badge thing, although all of them know now. But ask them, hey, how do you actually keep track of the conferences you attend, right? After, before. How do you, ask them like very, very kind of problem statement questions on trying to get them to tell you stories about things that they do. And so the things I didn't really talk about is if you talk to enough people, you start getting bored after a certain point. Once you start getting bored, that's when you need to analyze that data. So hopefully you've recorded it or you've written it down. Not even hopefully, you need to. And then you find what I call the patterns of pain. So you figure out what's the most painful thing for people. So for example, just playing it out a little bit, let's say for conference attendees, it could be something like, oh, I learned a lot of stuff, but I don't remember any of it, right? Where can I find that information? That might lead to a specific solution you might have, and it might have nothing to do with these badges. So you have to, like I was saying, you have to pretty much marry the problem, not the solution. So in every solution I hear from someone, every idea, I try to get them to agree that, no, you're really trying to solve this problem. Let's go focus on you figuring out if this problem even exists or not, and then work my way from there. Yeah.
So you talked in the beginning about having focus on that one specific idea.
Yeah.
And then in your talk, you talked about like a lot of different ideas and businesses that you're working on. I'm not sure if you're working on it concurrently or not. So how do you strike that balance between having focus, but it also sounds like you're involved in just a lot of stuff?
Sure. So for me, it's do what I say, not what I do. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. Totally kidding. We were very unfocused when we started our first company, our consulting company. Like more than I can even imagine. Like I don't know how I would deal with that unfocusedness today with the mindset I have. But all of the things that I basically described happened in some sequence. And now my main focus is Kissmetrics, and our Crazy Egg business basically runs itself. Today, there's about 4 employees on it. It's more profitable than Apple per employee, and there's a lot of systems we've built. I threw that one in there. There's a bunch of systems we built to automate a lot of things, and that's time for another talk or something. But essentially, we've automated so much of it that it kind of runs itself. There is a lot of growth in it, though, and if we invest more in it, that's great. So for me, I consider that a hobby at this point, and maybe I'll spend an hour or 2 every month on it, just to make some meaningful, talk to someone on the team there. But overall, like, it's not, focus is what it's going to take. Like, it's very hard to kill projects, but even recently we've started killing projects, and you'll hear more about that. Even in Kissmetrics, we're starting to kill stuff. So I got to say that, like, it's very hard, but you have to do it.
All right, round of applause.
Thank you.